articulate my point of view and continue to make it more and more concise. So I probably wrote like 300 scripts, like literally. And just for like the audience, like just like a crash course on that. The process is pretty simple. All you really need to do, like the first step is like, what people are only going to watch your video if they're going to get something from it. So what are they going to get from the video? So that's the first line. The second line is, what is the problem that they like? So I'll even kind of use this as an example. So like, if you want to create engaging video that gets you clients, right? That's the opener, right? Then you're going to need to be able to create videos quickly and articulate yourself. And so that's the second line. But that's not always easy because we were never taught to articulate ourselves in a clear, concise way, right? So that's the problem. I just said it. So I'm breaking this down as I go through. And then you want to relate with the audience. You want to give them some empathy and authority. And then I can say, I get it. I was there too, just like you are now. But since I started creating content, I've created like 300 videos. And this is the process that you'll go through to create good videos. First, you'll create a strong hook. Then you'll articulate the problem. Then you'll use some empathy and authority to establish some relatability to the viewer. And then you're going to deliver the steps to solve that problem, just like I am right now. So there's a framework, right? And then you basically say, hey, look, if you use my formula that I just literally gave you, then you're going to create great videos. If you don't, you're probably going to be stuck for a long time.
What's going on, guys? It's Yahavy David St. Clair Speaks, and you are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
Welcome back to the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. I'm your host, Yahavy St. Clair, sitting down with another incredible guest. This is going to be a good one. And I really mean that. This is going to be a good one. This is a guest that I had on my guest wish list of professionals that I want to interview. And I'm super excited to dive into this podcast because today we're sitting down with Stephen G. Pope. For those of you that don't know, he builds a sales generating content machine to help you manage and repurpose your content to generate more business. This is someone that I consistently see on my news feeds. I'm constantly consuming his content. I've been watching his content for months. It started from LinkedIn. Then all of a sudden he was popping up on my news feeds on TikTok. And I'm like, yo, I gotta get this guy on the show because there's so much that you could do with content. And the way Stephen breaks it down, it just makes so much sense. So super excited to have him on the show. Stephen, welcome to the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. Please give our listeners a 5-minute introduction on yourself, your brand, your business, and what brings you onto the show.
Yeah, first of all, number one, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the intro. I'll even try to like condense it even more. So what I help people do, like you said, is just help people build a sales generating content machine, help them come up with a way to create, repurpose, and distribute high quality, engaging content, at scale. So you can publish this stuff across multiple content or multiple channels, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, and then do it without losing your mind.
Yeah.
And really, that's it in a nutshell. So I've just been living and breathing this the last few years, and I'm an engineer. And so not only do I live and breathe this stuff for myself, like creating content, I started creating content several years ago, but because I'm an engineer and I'm a problem solver, I just started running into all these issues. I was like, man, this is hard. Right. And so then I started fixing this and fixing that. And I started creating some technology. And I think this is also a testament to creating content, but I just started creating technology for myself to solve my own problems. And then I started talking about some of these solutions I was coming up with the content, right? So I'd be like, yeah, I'm helping people do video, but check this out. I did this thing over here with this automation and this system here. And people were like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then at one point I heard Gary Vee said that he uses like Airtable. That's one of the systems I use. He's like, yeah, I use Airtable to do some of the work I do. And I was like, Airtable, that sounds interesting. I knew Airtable from before, so I started using that. And I just kept going, just kept building and solving problems. And I kept making the solution more and more generic so that it could work with anybody, multiple brands, multiple channels, storing all this stuff, different team members. And that's kind of how I arrived in here. And like, even before that, like I grew a different business, which was a software consulting business, and grew that to several $1 million a year. and I was like Inc. magazine's fastest growing company. So at this point, what I've done is found myself at a situation where I'm pulling all of my business, all of my technology, all of my content creation skills. And I was creating content to grow the last business too, but it was the blogging era. So I'm at a spot now where I've figured out a way to pull in all of the skills that I've generated over the last 40 years and pull them in together to do something that's kind of unique. Um, and then like I said, what's interesting about the content creation process is that because people kept seeing that content about the systems and processes, they're like, oh, I want that. And then that generated a whole new product. So I'm always telling people like content, like so many people are too short-sighted about how content works. It's like, when do I get my first lead after I make my first video? And I'm like, oh man, you're missing out on, first of all, learning how to articulate yourself, using the content to build new products, because you're interacting with real people and getting feedback that they think something is cool or not. Yeah, you'll get business. You'll have that one-off video that gets a client, right? But the long tail benefits of, meeting people like you, being on your show, learning from you, networking, creating content, learning to articulate yourself. It's funny, I mess up that word. And just generating new products, all from this content creation thing. It's insane.
It really is insane. And it kind of just, it speaks to your point. I found you, started following you because you was putting out content. And after, looking at your content for months, I'm like, yo, I've heard someone say the term quote unquote digital mentor. And you've been that for me, right?
Awesome, man. That's
again,
so cool.
I've been, Success Leaves Clues. I've tried Airtable. I've been looking at your content, and I know you're constantly pushing out these training videos, and you're always sharing. And I also kind of like to speak to your point on content. I've learned this too. Content is more so the long-term game. You're playing a long-term game. There's credibility there, right? It creates a lot of credibility. So
it is a long-term, it is a long-term game, but so for the people that want leads right away. So if someone comes to me and says, I want business tomorrow, I said, that's the wrong perspective. It's a long-term game. But the interesting thing is, if you have a long-term perspective, you will get clients pretty quickly. So it's like, but the mindset has to be correct. So that's why I say that. So when people say it's a long-term game, I want to say what I just said, that you can get clients quickly if you have the right perspective. Because when you say long-term game, people are like, oh man, like how long? Like 3 years? And I'm like, well, no, like just, you have the 3-year perspective and you'll get clients in a month. You want clients tomorrow, you'll never get them in 3 years.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I'm ready to dive into this. I'm about to roll up my sleeves, like mentally I'm rolling up my sleeves right now. I want to talk to you about social media automation. Why is it so important for all business professionals or anyone who wants to create content? Why is that so important for them to have in their arsenal of just managing their content and pushing that out?
Yeah, like at a basic level, and a lot of times what people think of is, when it comes to automation, is they immediately think of the buffers and the laters that where you can schedule and publish the content. And that can be a little bit dangerous one way or another, because like if you're just scheduling content and just pushing it out there and you're not interacting with people or like paying any attention to it, the content's not going to do well. You're not going to get any insights from it. So I want to draw a distinction that is automation, but where I focus most of my time is in the automation of like planning and organization and streamlining, because you're creating all of this content, all these video files, you're chopping things up. And what's going to happen very quickly is you're going to be overwhelmed with like so many files, and like, how do you keep track of all these things? How do you remember where they are? And so that becomes one of the most immediate things that if you tackle that and you really figure out a way to like document all this content and kind of map it through your flow so that it travels through the flow, and then you can distribute it to the right place and people aren't looking around for things. It's really a game changer. And so that's where I like people to focus, because like, in all honesty, hitting publish is like, I mean, it's annoying, but that's like a 5-second task if you have everything there. And then the interesting thing is, like, once you start automating some of the flows, like, so if I create a little TikTok, I can transcribe it, right? And then I can clean up that transcription real quick. And it's in my own voice already. It's already in my my mindset and how I do things. Now that can be a text post. I've just created some other automations where I take those text posts and then I can create a Twitter thread from it, right? And then I've created another automation where I can then take that Twitter thread, automatically take a picture of it, and now it's an image that I can then push back onto LinkedIn. I can take that Twitter thread and I can create like a slide deck, like through automations, just taking in like templated like backgrounds, and then it creates the slide deck, and then I can clean that up. So when you organize and catalog and tag and like all sorts of crazy things can happen.
Man, and this is the thing that, again, this is the thing that fascinates me so much, because there's so much value in creating content. Once you're in it, you're in it. Platforms like TikTok, we were talking a little bit before we were recording. I was like, hey man, I'm definitely gonna ask you some questions on TikTok. I want to dive into that. But one of the things that, I care most about now is not the likes, the views, and that means totally nothing to me. I care more so about my content depth, like the depth and the volume of the content that I'm creating. So since you're on the point of repurposing, I do this podcast full time. I'm always looking for ways to get more out of creating content. Less is more. And I'm learning that with repurposing content. I'm like, man, I'm leaving a lot of content on the table.
Right.
And
yeah.
To get a little bit more, it's also, I think one of my pain points that I struggled with before was the message that I want to share with my content, right? Because if I'm confused, my audience is going to be confused. Right. How do you get over that particular hurdle of being clear and concise with your message when you're pushing out that content? Because that could be a hurdle for some.
Yeah, and this is an interesting point because so many people get stuck at different points, right? So when I first started creating content, it was like I didn't have a podcast, I didn't have anything. It was always these like look into the camera and deliver a message. So I learned how to script out videos, and I learned a way to like articulate my point of view and continue to make it more and more concise. So I probably wrote like 300 scripts, like literally. And just for like the audience, like just like a crash course on that. The process is pretty simple. All you really need to do, like the first step is like, what people are only going to watch your video if they're going to get something from it. So what are they going to get from the video? So that's the first line. The second line is, what is the problem that they like? So I'll even kind of use this as an example. So like, if you want to create engaging video that gets you clients, right? That's the opener, right? Then you're going to need to be able to create videos quickly and articulate yourself. And so that's the second line. But that's not always easy because we were never taught to articulate ourselves in a clear, concise way, right? So that's the problem. I just said it. So I'm breaking this down as I go through. And then you want to relate with the audience. You want to give them some empathy and authority. And then I can say, I get it. I was there too, just like you are now. But since I started creating content, I've created like 300 videos. And this is the process that you'll go through to create good videos. First, you'll create a strong hook. Then you'll articulate the problem. Then you'll use some empathy and authority to establish some relatability to the viewer. And then you're going to deliver the steps to solve that problem, just like I am right now. So there's a framework, right? And then you basically say, hey, look, if you use my formula that I just literally gave you, then you're going to create great videos. If you don't, you're probably going to be stuck for a long time. So I did that process of learning how to mentally break that down like a million times. I've done it 2,000, 3,000 times at this point. So that's the first thing, is like, that's for just articulating individual ideas and practicing it.
It's interesting that you say this because, again, for me, I've been consuming your content for a long time. And to test to that point, you do exactly what you're talking about. There's this video. Here's my strategy that I use to, scale my business, and you could do it too. And like you're constantly with the hook. That's how you pull them in. But you also include something in your videos that It's really crucial. Like you have the subtitles always there. I don't think you have a video without subtitles.
I do make a mistake here and there, but I try.
But that's the thing that that hooked me in. You know, I looked at it, I'm like, wait a minute. It really made sense for me. Once I started to save some of the like TikTok informative videos that you started to share and put out. I'm like, wait a minute, man. Like I'm looking at this completely wrong. I have to look at it from a different lens. I have over 100 and something podcast interviews that I've done. If I times that by 100, that's a lot of repurposed content.
Right.
So how do you, I guess this is what I used to struggle with, and maybe I still struggle with it right here and there. It's the overwhelming factor, like getting in front of the herd, right? How do you get over that? Like maybe it's just a mental thing. Do you
Are you talking about like doing like face to like selfie type cameras? Like how do you get over that hurdle?
Nah, not even that. Just okay. You know, as easy as it is to do it, it's just as easy not to do it, right? How do you just get over the hurdle of, okay, I have 1,000 and something videos. How do I go about managing that without feeling overwhelmed? Because some people just crash like, oh man, I'm not doing that. Like I'll hire someone, and to your point, you know, they'll hire someone and, you know, Hootsuite or later they'll use a platform like that, and they're just posting it to post it, but it's not repurposed.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like the way I handled that overwhelm was to like automate it. I mean, that's literally why I built those systems, right? So like it is overwhelming, and I'm an engineer, so I like things like being like dialed in and like systematized. So here there's two options. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So quite literally, like either don't worry about it because otherwise it will be overwhelming. Just store those videos and come back to them when you need them. And like if you have that kind of mindset, you can. Like some people just like they don't worry about it. They're not going to produce as much content, I guarantee you. But like number one, you can just decide not to worry about it. Number two, you need to build out the systems and processes to help you organize it, and then to just mentally make sure you're checking all the right boxes as you go, and also keep it as dead simple as you can, right? Because it's so easy, especially for me, like it's so easy to just continue to add complexity, and that's going to be the death of being able to efficiently repurpose all this stuff. So you always have to just like I always think about it in frameworks. So when I create content, I'm always thinking, okay, this I almost don't even say I'm going to start a podcast. I just say I'm going to start an interview style recording. And from that recording, I will create a podcast. I will create clips. I will create a different version of it. I will create slide decks. And I get into the minutia of like what I need to do to convert it into each of those different things. And then once you actually have it into like a system, then you can efficiently outsource it to somebody. Like if you outsource this stuff to an agency, it's going to be extraordinarily expensive and probably won't actually do what you want, because it's not going to be connected to like your mission, vision, and like your style and all that stuff. So it's getting into the minutia and just documenting these things, and also understanding you don't have to do it all at once. Like you can scale up. Like I'm still continuing to scale up. Like I'm at this point right now where I think it's like in a month or two, it's really going to be able to just turn it on because I have everything in place. But it took me a while to get that. And so you have to have patience too.
Yeah, definitely have to have patience. Okay. Speaking of patience, I want to talk to you about TikTok, because, you know, TikTok for me is a platform, you know, at first I'm like, okay, I have to be patient with what I'm doing on the platform. I had no strategy, you know, when I first got on the platform. I'm like, okay, just another social media platform, right? Boy, was I wrong. It's a platform where it's like, man, I've just, you know, I'm seeing a lot of success from the platform from others and et cetera. And and here's the other part. I would argue that TikTok is going to give YouTube a run for its money in terms of the informative side, right? Like when I consume, when I'm saying, okay, like Steven, I'm constantly consuming your content, I'm referencing TikTok. I know you have a YouTube channel. I've subscribed to your YouTube channel as well, and you have a lot of videos on your YouTube channel. But from the informative side, I know if I follow a particular hashtag, that specific content is going to constantly come up on my feed. And I always stop the scroll whenever I'm looking at your content. Oh, here are 5 things that you need to do to get more eyes and ears on your content, for example. They're constantly going to push you to my feed consistently. My question for you about TikTok is, how did you find your niche so quick and finding that success on TikTok?
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't actually that quick. So I was on LinkedIn doing my thing, creating videos and doing text posts, all that kind of stuff. I was sitting at a Christmas, I was like just flipping through TikTok. I was like, man, like I wish I like, and then I was thinking about LinkedIn. I was like, man, there's so many people that are on LinkedIn that had got on a couple years ago. And like, because of that, they're like much bigger now. And I was just flipping through TikTok and I was like, man, this is so much different. Like, and it's like, there's all these people just like going viral on it right now. And I'm here watching. And so why can't it just be me making content here? And so it really was like I had I could argue a whole different business when I first got on there. And I was just creating content. I had a few go viral, like I was giving Zoom tips. And so my content, if you go back to the very beginning, you can actually see my first studio that I had. And it's like pretty funny. But I didn't. And so I just kept creating content. And I think that's the genius of it, is that the content and the interactions led me to where I am now. So now if I'm thinking about doing this, where I create a new channel where it's like super hyper focused, because I've got product market fit. I know exactly what people want. I could just like churn that stuff out. And but if you go and look at my channel, it was kind of all over the place. And that's okay. And that's cool. And that actually will help you get to where you need to go. So I think it's all about where you are in your journey. So like if you're an established business and you've been around for 20 years and you know exactly, like you have testimonials and results and all this stuff, you just jump onto the platform doing what you do. If not, then you just jump on there and you just allow yourself the freedom to explore.
Like right before we were recording, I was talking about like, the stigma of TikTok. People think, oh, it's a dancing platform or it's for fun. But back to the point of the informative side, I've had times where I've sat in on your TikTok lives where you're live stream recording, and I believe it was a time some months ago you were doing like a webinar or something like that, and I'm just sitting in. I'm like, man, this is good stuff, right?
Cool.
I want to talk to you about that in particular. With the live feature on TikTok, and being on the platform, being very consistent on the platform, again playing the long-term game. What have been some teachable moments for you on that platform?
Yeah. So from a live perspective, that's something I want to do a lot more of. And I have kind of explored different things. Um, I think the main things that I've learned is just like going live is one of those things where you do interact with people, and you have more impact on people than you might think, even if only a few people came in. Like I couldn't have remembered that you had come in there, but I've had clients that had just popped into a live at one point. So here's the thing about content, is that people don't always understand, is like you don't always understand the impact you're having on people, because they're not reaching out and saying, like, I didn't know that I was number 2 on your list. Like, so that was amazing to hear. I was like, really cool. But you don't always know those things. And so I had one client that I ended up getting, and he was like, yeah, I went on your live. I was there. And then he showed me his Notion, and he had all these links to all my videos. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know you existed. And I was like, that's insane. Like in a really good, positive way. But like, especially if you're like an introverted person like me, like where sometimes you can be a little internal, like you get inside your own head, and like, but all these interesting things are happening. So just start going live and don't worry about who's there, like how many people show up. Like, don't be afraid if like you literally have nobody to talk to. So I'm starting, like, I always like, just so you know my future plans, I always like trying to combine as much as possible just from a mental, like my engineer. So I'm going to do a live show and I'm going to perfect kind of like that way I was doing it before, but where I go live on LinkedIn, I go live on TikTok. I'll even have a Zoom where people can join Zoom, and I'll try to integrate all three of those at the same time in a way where I can pull in questions from all these different people. So that's kind of my plan in the future. Because I just think when I do stuff like that, that's kind of like how I stand out, is like being creative in that way, just like the way I do in the automations and stuff like that. So that's kind of like my overall thought on the lives.
No, lives are great. You brought up a point with LinkedIn, and I kind of want to swing to LinkedIn in particular because there is a lot of opportunity, of course, on LinkedIn. You have a really big following on LinkedIn. Um, your first time, I don't know if you remember, you probably do, but your first post on LinkedIn, what was that like then versus now being on the platform? Because I looked at your connection, like, man, this guy's like, oh man, you got a lot of connections, right? A lot of people follow and consume your content. So what is it like for you now navigating on the LinkedIn platform, and what do you like most about it?
Yeah, LinkedIn, like, well, going back to like my first post, I would just, I think my very first post I was like, go check out my blog, which is, nobody's going to go check out your blog if you just post it like that. And then when I really started to act, then I just started to create content. I really had no idea what I was doing. I just kept trying to provide value. My first video, I was like scared out of my mind. If you can actually go back to it, and I'm all like stiff and stressed out. I like to like actually look at that. Um, what I've learned about LinkedIn is that it's a networking platform. So you can create content there and people will see it. It's got the organic reach, right? But I think where you're going to get the most benefit is if you treat it like a networking group that scales, right? So like if you're on there and you're creating content and you're going out and finding people that you care about or you disagree with, and you start voicing those opinions, and you're connecting with people, maybe you get on a quick call with people, not to like pitch them your services, but to really network. You can network at scale and you're creating content. I think you'll kill it on LinkedIn. I think a lot of people have a hard time doing that because it's this like very boring interface, and the mindset is just like, how the heck am I going to get, like, well, it's just like, how do you get business when you go to a networking group? Like, you go talk to people and you're like, hey, what do you do? Like, what's going on? Like, how can I help you? They ask you what you do. And you start building those relationships. It's just that like LinkedIn, you can do it at a scale. And if you really provide value on that platform, you'll grow like crazy.
All right. So, of course, we are all here today because of content. We are not here without the content. So, since we're still on the point of LinkedIn, I've noticed this, of course, with social media. The language is always different per platform in terms of like the content that you're pushing out. I know this just based off my personal experience. I get more clients and more business, more connections, and people jumping on the show through LinkedIn versus a platform like Instagram and Facebook. I want to ask you, how do you overcome that? Because to a degree, it could be true based on who you're following or who follows you, but when you look at platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, maybe Pinterest, and maybe I'm forgetting another platform like, like Snapchat or something like that. The language is always different when you're sharing that content. So if you're repurposing a volume and you're doing like a batch upload or something like that, do you adjust the language per platform? How do you get over that? Because that's something I struggled with before.
I don't really, to be honest with you. I just try to be like, I think because I'm just kind of direct and I'm just giving messages about content, and it's like, I don't really think about it too much.
Right.
I'm sure there could be some nuance, and I'm sure I'm losing out to a certain degree because of that. But like I will notice that certain videos on TikTok don't do as well on Reels, but then other ones vice versa, and then vice versa on YouTube Shorts. So from a technical standpoint, what I'm going to start doing is pulling in all of those analytics and comparing them to see if I can spot trends and differences in the audience. And I will say, like on YouTube, depending on what you publish, you can get some real like nasty like responses, like because people that are on YouTube, I think for the most part, they're already there for a reason. Like they're searching for something. So if something comes up in their feed and it's just like out of the blue, they're going to be like, "What the heck is this?" Like, and then I think so the algorithm's picking those things up. So I don't really think about it. I just come as me on all the platforms, but maybe as I have more control and over some of that subtlety, and I have the ability to start tailoring things and like tagging things in a more complex way, then maybe I'll start to go there.
That makes a lot of sense. You're not the first person I've heard that from about YouTube in particular. You're more than likely to get hate comments on YouTube anywhere else. That's for sure. I want to talk to you. This is something I really want to talk about. I want to talk to you about content sales marketing, right? And getting over I don't want to be salesy on LinkedIn, right? The right and the wrong way to do it, right? And I'll give you a prime example. Okay, say if someone made like a Canva flyer with their ebook. Okay, here, buy now, Lincoln. Like, what are the do's and don'ts of content marketing if you're looking to bring in sales and revenue through content?
Probably one of the easiest like transferable mental models that you could transfer is just like, what would you do if you went to a networking group? Would you walk around to everybody and be like, "Hey, I sell insurance or I sell consulting"? You wouldn't do that. So if you just apply all those same human behaviors that you would have now, like if you got into a conversation with somebody and they're like, "Yeah, I'm looking for someone to help me start my podcast," I'd be like, "Hey, check it out, man. Guess what? I do that, right?" Um, so I think that's all it comes down to. It's just like transfer, like don't overthink it. Just transfer your God-given human skills. Hopefully, you've developed some over the time, and just apply those online. Like you wouldn't go into a group and just start telling everybody to check out your website or to check out or to sign up for your newsletter. I mean, some people do, but guess what? Those people don't usually succeed in those groups. So just apply the same thing. Like your content is like you being up on stage. So if you're up on stage giving a presentation at a group, you're not for the most part, you're like, hey, here's some information that you can use. At the end, some people are more aggressive than others. You might say, hey, and if this is something you're interested in, give me a call and we can talk and see if there's a right fit. But I think in general, you just want to provide value, show that you're the expert, and not ask for much.
You made that's a good point. There's something that you kind of mentioned a little earlier. You mentioned that you're an introvert, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm an introvert as well. It's hard to believe sometimes. So, advice for introverts when it comes to content creation, because as you mentioned, like it's very easy to get in your own head of, no, you know what, I'd rather keep this to myself. But you want to put it out there, but there's some type of fear from the pullback that you could actually receive. How do you get over that?
So here's an interesting thing that I've talked a lot about recently, is that everyone has a blocker of some sort. Could be fear of video, could be you don't know how to talk, could be you don't think your advice is valuable, imposter syndrome. It could be like a wide range of things. So there are tactical things to help you on each of those things, and we could talk about each of those things. But the one thing you have to have in common before you can solve any of those things is like a rock solid commitment to move forward. So like, I will do this. So when I started my next business after selling my previous one, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the video thing. I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to figure out how to do this. There were lots of sleepless nights thinking about what am I going to say? Like, how am I going to get on there? Like, but I had the commitment. And so that got me over the first hurdle. And then, if it's imposter syndrome where you don't think you have something valuable to say, I think the main thing is just to focus on who you're trying to help and really just kind of razor in on like, well, what is something that I want to help this person? What is it that they don't have and where do they want to go? And what's some piece of information that would help them get from that place to the next place? And keep focused on them. And that will help you get out of yourself, right? Because then you're not focused inward anymore. If you're afraid of video, there's probably several different people or resources you can go to that will help you with some of those fears and phobias. A lot of it's just practice and just doing it. And so I think it's commitment, number one, and then being willing to isolate what is the real thing holding me back. And then just go and finding the individual training to help you on that one piece. Like if you need help on scripting a video, I can help you do that. I can help you write the whole thing out, edit it, make it concise. It's just skills you need to learn to get past it.
It's so interesting you bring this up, but that is kind of like that. Recently, I've been hearing a lot of fear of video. I've interviewed maybe like the last 3 to 4 people. We've been talking about this. I've recently interviewed a media coach and a communication coach, and we were talking about the fear of recording content. This is a blockage that, believe it or not, a lot of business professionals struggle with. They struggle with seeing themselves on video. This is a new day and age. And I think for me, the last 2 years have been really rewarding, because prior to this, I was a full-time personal trainer. And that's all I knew for 9 years.
Interesting.
And I launched a podcast, right? So I launched this because this kind of came from in the process of me writing a book. But I was someone who struggled with video. And it was weird at first, because it's like, you hear yourself, you see yourself. It's like, oh, why did I say it? Why did I look like that? But I started to notice, just like fitness, when I started getting my reps, in, I got better.
Yeah.
So what are some tips that you would say, because that you would suggest to anyone that struggles with the fear of recording content?
Yeah. I mean, number one, commit, and then start to practice, get those reps in. Get some help on the things that are holding you back. Like if you don't know how to script something, like even in this podcast, in the beginning of it, I talked about how do you write a clear, concise message? Because if you do that and you look at that, and you're like, man, that's a good piece of content right there, right? Then you're going to be able to get on camera and deliver it more succinctly. And then there are other techniques as well. So like I also notice people have a hard time getting through an entire video without messing up. So I don't know, like if some people aren't watching this, but like if you write out a script, right? I can put this script like right underneath the camera. And then I can look at the camera and I can read line number 1. Do you want to get over the fear of video? And then I can go down and I can read the next one. If so, I'm going to show you in this video how to get over the fear of video. And then I can stop and I can go read the next line. And then in the editing process, you just clip out all the mistakes. And then you just make a real concise video. And people are always worried, well, isn't it going to feel choppy? I mean, go look at every single YouTube video. They all do that. They're all chopped up, and most LinkedIn videos the same. So there's all these like little techniques like that, recording techniques, that if you're only reading one line at a time, it's pretty easy to give a punchy like sentence. It's when you start forgetting and then you're like, oh, what's the next line? And then you're like, oh, now I got to re-record the whole video. That's daunting to go through that. Now you've like spent 3 hours trying to record a video.
Yeah, that on the style, the on the fly versus the cut style type of content. It's so funny that we're on this point, because I was someone, I used to make a lot of motivational videos, and I'm like, yo, if I mess up, I got to do this all over again. And when I try to do it the second time, it doesn't sound as passionate the first time around. I'm like, oh my gosh. But the cut style actually works. So for me, it's like I put it in bulletin points, and I'm like, okay, first 10 seconds, next 10 seconds. Okay, now it's a 20-second video. Boom. Now it just sounds better. Add that last 5 seconds. But there's another thing I want to talk about, and you are the perfect person to ask this. I want to talk to you about call to action, right? What does that look like on video content? What would some suggestions be? Would it be follow me for more tips, or a subtitle that says follow me for more? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, the more you like, I go back and forth on this, because I also think as we go forward and there's more and more content, I think people are going to get really tired of being told what to do. I think people are already starting to get tired of it. So I'm getting to a point now where I don't even like, for a lot of my videos, it just ends. It's like, hopefully you liked it. But like, you can always, I will say this, if you're trying to grow something, if you're trying to grow a YouTube channel, if you're trying to grow a podcast, be consistent in what you want to grow. If you want people to book calls, tell them to book calls. If you want people to like and follow, then be consistent. If on one video you're like, hey, like and follow, and then the next one you're like, hey, go check out my website, hey, go check out my YouTube, like nothing's going to grow. None of those calls to actions are going to be effective because 1% of the people are going to do it at any given time. So what I would just say is like, what do you want to grow? And then use that like every time, or don't, because it's just going to annoy people.
It's so funny we're on that point because I post on LinkedIn, like, yeah, well, subscribe to my podcast. Man, nobody be subscribing when I do that.
Yeah.
It's so
some people do, and it will trickle through.
Yeah.
And so if you're consistent, so what I do is like, I'll put it in the first comment. But yeah, I mean, like you got to let the content lead. Like if you're saying stuff that's relevant to people and they like it, they're going to find you.
I always say this: where there's value, people will follow. Where there's value, people will follow. Again, I'm someone that always wants to learn how to do something the better way, and there's always a better way to do it. I don't believe that the greatest way is set in stone. Someone's always going to discover a better way to do it. As good as one particular platform is, there's going to be another platform that's going to give that platform a run for its money. My question for you is, what excites you most about what you do?
Yeah, for me, it's like innovation, creativity. So I have to continue to build out new things. So that's a strength and also a weakness. So I got to make sure not to destroy the pillars that I've left behind. But I get excited like talking about the new things I'm going to do. And that's how I bring energy to what I'm doing. That's what makes me feel like an innovator or an entrepreneur. Like I'm a technology guy. So I like to continue to push what I'm doing such that I can then roll that back into what I'm doing. And I'm getting better at like creating new things and then integrating them into a cohesive package that just gets more valuable instead of just like starting from scratch again. But I like to just continue to innovate and be creative. And that's when I see my channels grow and more book calls, it's all because I've learned something new and I'm pulling that in and I'm talking about it and getting people excited about it. Because there's so many people in the content space. It's a very innovative space right now. And so that's it for me. It's just, and I love helping people. So I've always enjoyed working with entrepreneurs, helping them think through and expand and grow.
It's so fun, man. And if I was following you, if you were creating content like you're creating now, back when I was a personal trainer, I would have, oh my gosh, I would have tore that industry up. Because now looking back, I'm like, wait a minute, I was just posting before and after photos. There was a lot more I could have done, especially with the exercises that I was doing on a day-to-day and repurposing that. In case you missed today's back workout, here's 5 ways to get a better backer, things like that. It's like, it's so interesting that I think content, what excites me the most about content is it helps everyone. There's enough content makes me feel like this. And it's like, time kind of take away a little bit from what Gary Vaynerchuk says. I'll never forget this video. And this was the video that made me fall in love with content because I was in this exact position. He was like, yeah, I don't care if you have no dollars, if you have nothing in your bank account right now. If you have this, if you have a phone, you could create content. You could create something. And he's like, it's all about perspective. You know how he is. It's all about perspective.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
It's so true. And I'm like, man, you're totally right. Because here I am financially stuck. But I could actually create content that could either you could do a lot, right? It could create cash flow, a community. It could create a brand, more credibility. So it just really dawned on me that we live in such a really rewarding time. Like If this was 40 years ago, I forget about it. But right now, it's just, man, it's just like, I'm just
it's
really
a gold mine if you jump on it. And that, I think that's kind of like one of my missions and purposes. Like, I don't think a lot of people are really hip to what's going on. And like, the world's moving much faster than a lot of people realize. And like, to your point, like, whether it's TikTok or LinkedIn, or it's like content is going to continue to get stronger. And so like, even if you miss out on a platform, it's like, there's going to be the next one and the next one. And yeah, it's a great opportunity as long as you have the mental mindset to kind of deal with just like the fragmentation of all this content and like getting distracted and like, you know, getting hate comments and like managing some of that stuff. Like, it's not exactly fun. There are times where I'm like going through TikTok and I'm like, what the heck am I doing? Like, why am I here? Like, need to be go spend my time elsewhere. So I think you got to learn some of those new skills. I think that's why there's so many mindset coaches out there right now. Cause like, so much opportunity, but so much newness that people don't know quite how to like deal with it. And so, yeah, opportunity. And then just, you got to be conscious you're living a good life too.
Absolutely, man. Content is king. Content is king. All right. Summing up this interview, this was really exciting. I like the fact, and I'm mad I actually didn't take your advice on something. Killing two birds, one stone. I could have been recording without AI and have that text transcription from the podcast interview. But these are little things that I'm now thinking about during this interview. It's like, wait a minute. I'm like, okay, so this is
well,
good.
you could throw it into Descript, and Descript will create it after the fact.
Oh, see, all right, Descript. I got to check that out. Never heard.
That's a crazy tool. If you haven't heard of Descript, man, like, you got to check that out.
I got to check that out. Okay, so what would you say is the takeaway message you want, listeners, the viewers to take away from, you appearing on the show today and your story and your background?
I think the thing that I'm coming back to most right now is like, so I do all this automation and content and all that kind of stuff, and that it's fun and it's helpful, but like, you still want to be focused on like making like a direct impact with like one person at a time. And like, just as evidence of that, like, I don't have the most followers out there on TikTok, but it's building a very sustainable business, so it's not about having 1 million followers. It's about making impact on people, having people reach out to you, be like, man, thanks for that. That was awesome. Like, that's a great video. Or like, those kind of things. When you start to get that kind of feedback, something's working. So just look for that individual connection.
Yeah, that's a good point. And keep showing up too. Keep showing up.
Oh man, there's so many videos I've created where I didn't want to like show my face.
Yeah, keep showing up. I think the biggest, if I would add a takeaway message on this, it's you never know who's watching. You never know who's watching. Because I've been watching you again. I've been watching your content for months now, and here we are today. And I'm so excited that we had the opportunity to do this and actually meet.
Me too, man.
This was great. This was rewarding. For the listeners and viewers, like I always say, what good is information if you don't apply it? Apply what you've learned today. Create content. Start now.
Don't overcomplicate it.
And don't overcomplicate it.
You don't need automation to get going.
And you don't need automation to get going. You need a camera to hit record.
And a commitment.
All right. And all that good stuff. All right. So with that being said, I want to thank you for watching or tuning in. I'll catch you in the next episode. This is the St. Clair Speak Show.
See you guys.